Welcome back to another episode of Behind the Burger. I'm Caroline Romo, the Executive Director for the New Mexico Beef Council, and I'm here with Denny Gentry, who lives here in Albuquerque, and he is the former executive of the New Mexico Cattle Growers, founder of the USTRC, the World Series Team Roping, the Super Looper Magazine, and Riata Stallion Incentive. Denny, thank you for joining the podcast.
My pleasure.
I'm so excited to have you here. Well, I kind of like to start from the beginning. So where are you from and kind of what's the background that,
down in southern Otero County there, our place that kind of straddle the Texas-New Mexico line between Carlsbad and El Paso there, a little town called Dale City that my grandfather founded.
Perfect. Well, and you've lived other places and you started at, or you helped start with the New Mexico Beef Council, and you told me about the being the executive secretary for the New Mexico Cattle Growers. Of course, our organizations work hand in hand in a lot of ways, but talk to me about the New Mexico Beef Council and your involvement there.
Well, in the I think it was mid-'80s when the beef checkoff was passed, and of course it was building up steam. Checkoff was getting passed in lots of states, and that was promoting beef was what every association was wanting to do. We've got to promote ourselves. If we don't, well, that was going, and the Farm Bureau was doing it, and all the cattle organizations were doing it. And here in New Mexico, they tried a couple of times and got close. But one year, pretty much everybody got on the same page, and they were going to try to get the beef checkoff done. And at that time, I was running the Cattlemen's Association, and the main lobbyist there handled all the lobbying in Washington and Santa Fe. And I would say probably as it went along, I wound up, Farm Bureau was partners with us on this thing, but as it went along, they started dumping more and more of that on me. And the reason was because when we went up there, we thought all the cowboys were united in one group, and we were going to rah-rah pass this thing through. And that was not the case, because there were a lot of cowboys that didn't like that idea of being taxed on their cattle, and they were a little bit unhappy about it. And 2 or 3 of them were senators.
Oof.
And so they were very silently working behind the scenes to counter everything that we were doing. And at some point, Farm Bureau said, okay, we're handling this. You try to handle your people over there. And I understood what they meant. So we had 2 groups of ranchers walking around that rotunda up there, one group working for and one group working against, and us running around trying to patch all the places. And the legislators, representatives and senators were saying, hey, we'll do whatever you guys want to do as soon as y'all can agree on what it is you want to do.
Yeah.
And eventually we got it through, but it was the first time that I had ever lobbied on something, because usually when you go up there, all the cowboys were for the same thing. This is the first time that it was split down the middle, and it was an eye-opener.
Oh, yeah, it makes you worry. I think in some ways sometimes the checkoff is still a split conversation. And I'm really grateful that it is in existence for not only my career, but also the impact that I see it has with consumers. Yeah. I also think that when we talk about the podcast, we try and kind of explain who the Beef Council is. And it's interesting to me that we're created by state and federal law, but then now as an organization, we can't lobby and we don't do anything politics. That's what New Mexico Cattle Growers is for.
Yeah, it was that way back then, see, because a lot of times I would be carrying the water for the livestock board, and in a lot of cases for New Mexico State University, because at that time they weren't allowed. So anything that was going on with the Ag College, Farm Bureau and Cattle Growers were the 2 that were carrying the mail on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's come a long way, right? I think New Mexico agriculture has won a lot of big things, and I see positivity, and I also see positivity in me not having to take bills to the floor.
We had a really, Farm Bureau had always been kind of, they weren't real proactive politically, and Cattle Growers was during that time period. And then in the late 80s, they had this young guy come along, and he was pretty aggressive, and he did a hell of a job. His name was Jeff Whitty.
Well, we just had a podcast with Jeff. He was one of our guests a couple times ago. Yeah, and he said he was a reluctant politician.
Well, he wasn't actually. He can say that but I had worked with 5 different government guys for Farm Bureau, and Jeff was in a different league.
Yeah. Oh man, that's so cool. Yeah, I know he said his trajectory wasn't originally that, but then it worked, and then he realized he found his place.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's neat. We've already talked about before we started recording the small world of New Mexico agriculture.
Totally.
And even agriculture in general. So to kind of get right into it with even your titles in the introduction. So New Mexico cattle growers, the rumors are, or the story is, which you've now confirmed, and we'll let you confirm again, that one of the first team ropings that you put on was for the New Mexico cattle growers.
I had a friend over there. Don King was the executive director for Texas and Southwestern Cattle Raisers, and we had a membership in our organization was a little bit stale, and then you'd hear them talking, everybody here is old, and we got to get the kids involved, and how do you do that? And so every cattle organization was trying to get new membership in, and Don King had a program he was running in Texas, and it was association cuttings, and they wouldn't allow anyone that was a professional horse trainer or involved in AQHA cutting or anything. They had to be on the ranch, and they had to be either an employee or a family member or something like that. And they had kicked that off and ran it for 2 years, and were just going gangbusters on their deal and getting all these young people in and getting their membership picked up. And Don called me up on the phone, and he said, "You need to do that in New Mexico. You need to go." I said, "We don't have any cutting over here." And he said, "Well, what do the Cowboys do?" And I said, "Team rope." He said, "We're with team ropers." He said, "Well, do it with team rope, but don't be a dummy." So Jasper Coons, who lived over in Rio Rancho over there, Jasper was an old turtle, and he was a rancher, and he was former chairman of our membership committee and everything. And when I hit him with that, I'll run interference with the board of directors. I'll get this through. So we built a county by county. We'd go around qualify ropers in the counties, and then we would have at the state convention, we would have an event here in Albuquerque over at Tingley. And what started happening is we started having people from Texas and Colorado and Arizona joining New Mexico cattle growers so they could get in that team roping. And we started that in 83, and by about 86 or 87, it was getting out of hand, and the board of directors called me in and said, well, our dues at that time was $40 a year, and they said, Stockman Magazine cost us X dollars a member, and the newsletters cost us X dollar a member, and these people aren't interested in cattle growers, they're interested in roping, and by our estimation, we're losing $10 a member to your team roping. And so I said, well, I'll come up with an idea, because this was a benefit. The funds were benefiting New Mexico and Boys and Girls Ranch.
Okay.
Is where that was going to. So the next year I came in and I said, okay, if you're not interested in cattle growers, we will let you come, but you're going to pay a day permit. And so the 390 teams of division over here at Tingley Coliseum with cow cutters. And when it was all said and done, the permits made more money than the roping did for the charity. And by that time, it's dawning on me that, kind of like you said about Jeff Whitty, that I may have found my niche here.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where it all took off at. And so we did New Mexico championships in 88 and 89, and I turned my resignation in 89, and we started USTRC in January of 1990.
Wow. So I know for some New Mexicans, they're really proud of the fact to see how that's grown, and that it started in New Mexico. I had a rancher tell me that story as I was getting on a flight to go to Vegas to go rope in the finale. Well, the history, and so that's really neat.
Well, and it was really funny because New Mexico has never, ever really acknowledged that. In fact, we had every major facility in the United States trying to get us to come put on the U.S. finals in their area, and we couldn't even get the Chamber of Commerce or anybody in Albuquerque to acknowledge that. They were worried about the Arab horse show.
Okay.
And we're saying, we're homegrown. We're building this whole industry here in Albuquerque. They didn't care. And the same with World Series. When World Series came along, this is not cowboy country.
Right.
It just doesn't. It never did resonate here.
Well, and it's a important part of what we do at the Beef Council too. We had billboards this summer, and then we have this podcast trying to teach people that New Mexico is beef country and New Mexico is cowboy country. I mean, yes, Albuquerque, obviously, in ways you've seen more than me, that isn't as accepting of it. But New Mexicans, there's cowboys, the cowboyest of cowboys. Like, we are the Wild West in a lot of ways.
It's all together, the whole. I'm of course, for the last 30 years, I'm dealing with United States and Canada and Brazil, and I even have ropings in Dominican Republic. We did ropings for a while in the Czech Republic, a little in Italy. My man there was in Italy that was putting on the events in Europe, has retired and started growing almonds now, so I don't have that over there anymore. But when you start thinking in terms of national and international, I just don't think in terms of New Mexico any longer. It's part of the...
But yeah, gone beyond.
It's gone beyond.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, so for folks, if there's listeners or viewers watching that maybe don't understand team roping, so I just want to kind of go back to team roping from the very base of it is a skill or a tool, or can be a skill or a tool used on a ranch, right? When you're in a pasture, especially in New Mexico, you can't get an animal to a horse trailer or a cow trailer. You can't get them to a trailer necessarily. You can't get them to a small pen to doctor. But what you do have is a horse and a rope. And that's still a pretty common way of doctoring and managing herds. And then, like anything, we got a little competitive back in the day, right? And so team roping is now a competition, right? It's now an equine competition, and a very large equine competition, thanks to a lot of the work you do.
Well, I've been pitching the same pitch for 3 decades, and it's starting to catch on now. I'm starting to see it in a lot of print and everything, because they always would try to go, well, you've got working cow horse, and you've got cutting and reining, and team roping is a discipline. It's one of the rodeo disciplines and everything. Well, the drum I've beat all along is, no. This is cowboy golf. We are cowboy golf. We are not a discipline. And now everybody's starting to catch on and going, because we've got all the cutters and the reiners and the racetrack guys and the ranchers and the farmers and anybody else that watched Yellowstone that wants to compete.
Yeah, they come to team roping. Well, and it has such a great entry level thing. Not to go too far into it, but it's set up that beginners can be winners in some ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So how else would you say the industries are connected, team roping and ranching?
I think there was a time, I've talked to you 2 or 3 times, and you're kind of thinking in terms of beef. But I've never looked at that in that paradigm. To me, it's cattle and horses and cowboys and the whole realm of it. You can't separate it. I mean, you can't separate the horse breeding, and it's another side of it, and no more than you can with water and minerals and every other thing that goes along with living in the 16 western states and now beyond that, So I don't view beef as a separate entity. And in fact, I guess had a guy tell me here a while back, he said, well, you don't know that much about the beef industry. And I said, well, I know a little. And he said, well, what do you know? And I said, well, I know that there's 40,000 members in our organization. There's 20,000 that come and go. There's 60,000. And if you take that 60,000, cut it in half to about 30,000, and figure out that they buy 2 sets of cattle to practice on a year, from 6 to 12 head, we're handling about 250,000 head of steers a year that are going to wind up in slaughter at some point. And he kind of looked at me, what are you talking? I said, well, we're in the beef business.
Oh, big. Yeah, absolutely. I think the cattle that are used for roping might not be the same cattle that are for the steaks and the high quality cuts, but they're still a high quality meat, and it's still a great animal that's going to go into the beef supply.
I mean, with this grass fed thing going on, I mean, you're seeing a lot of marketing and packing going on these Corrientes, and or the native roping cattle, and it's happening more and more, and people are moving to a thing. I mean, that's what they see. That's what y'all are advertising, lean beef, and so they know where to find it, and that's usually us first.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I mean, I always tease, I don't have a lot of cattle myself, but I do have 7 head of Corrientes.
I kind of nailed you, didn't I?
Yeah, exactly.
How many times do you buy those?
Well, we actually, we've held on to these ones for quite some time.
Well,
so we don't practice very much.
And, of course, this market right now, we'll never see this again, and a lot of people are hanging on.
Yes, yeah, we are those. And for whatever reason, we've been really lucky with some of our cattle. We can keep them about 2 years, but we are also weekend warriors. So when we rope, we're roping in the tiny bit of daylight we have after work and before the kids got to get to bed.
There you go.
And so they stay fresher longer at our house.
Yeah. No dally, none of that stuff.
Yeah, we take really good care of them. They live the high life. We usually don't get rid of them until they don't fit in the chute.
There you go.
What is something that you are proud of that you've worked on recently?
Oh gosh, the last frontier for team roping is to get the earnings on. We've spent a good part of 3 decades creating this Cowboy golf deal that's producing over $100 million a year in earnings. It's $1 billion a year industry. Within the horse industry, though, we never tracked earnings or any of those type of things. And so when we started the Riata Stallion Incentive a few years ago, we had 180 stallions came on board to promote their stallions. Kind of the way I can describe it is a country club, and we've got an event coming up in 3 weeks where we've got $1.8 million added money. That's never occurred in the cowboy world ever, and that's all stallion money that we're using. But the only way you get in is if you're riding a horse that's out of one of those, that's a progeny from one of those stallions. Recently, my partner that I had in Riata sold their part of Riata to Equine Network, who has Global Handicaps, which has got all of the earnings records for every cowboy in the world. So now we're working with AQHA and Equine Network, and we're going to marry those earnings to those horses. So potentially, and I'll give you a picture of that. The top 3 would be cutting produces about $60 million a year in earnings for stallions, barrel racing $67 million, and horse racing $150 million. Since Riata Stallion Incentive came along, us and the fraternities, we're laying down about $15 million in earnings on those horses. But in the very near future, we're going to try to pass the barrel racers and the cutters, and then at that point, the whole breeding aspect, whether they are ranch bred, cutting bred, working cow horse bred, whatever, we're going to find out what the true market is for the horse, because we've known all along that the cowboy golf world actually controls the horse market. Nobody wants to admit it, but it's the truth. And so we got Stevie Ray Vaughan in there last year before last. He was our top stallion last year. And Alvin told me the story. He said, we had 200 colts in the NCHA fraternity. And so he said, I said to my trainer, I'm not quite sure why we need to get involved in the team roping deal. And he said, because these 200 colts, by March, 90% of them are going to be team roping horses. So that's catching on. A lot of these guys that have been traditionally reining, cutting breeders are going, we recognize this is our market also.
Yeah, that's always been the thing since I was a kid. Everybody wanted a cutting reject or, that phrase or whatever. But the truth of the matter is they didn't have to be a reject. They could have been a prospect or
and
whatever.
That's what the fraternity people are doing right now. They're saying these are not rejects. We start them at 3 years old. They're being trained for one purpose and one purpose only.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great thing that they've seen.
Yeah.
Interesting. So you've got that coming up soon, which by the time the podcast releases, it might have just happened. Yeah. But that'll be an interesting thing to follow. So we talked about cattle and the roping industry. Of course, those cattle are really important to the U.S. cattle herd, especially right now because we have low herd numbers. So those cattle are probably coming into the beef supply maybe more often in some ways, or we're holding on to them. What would you say is the most rewarding part of? Typically we often are interviewing ranchers, but of owning cattle or of being in this cattle and equine focused industry, what do you find the most rewarding?
Well, of course, when I got out of college and I took this job here, it was supposed to be a temporary job. They had lost their executive, and they said, yeah, you're going to come in here and you're going to do this for 3 or 4 months until we have a chance to find somebody that's qualified to do it. And I took to the association business pretty well, and that became my occupation and something that I've done, and I've enjoyed that part of it for a long, long time. But if you take the hundreds and hundreds of events, and these big events take, like the finale there, which last year was at 19.7 million, which is the richest quarter horse event and the largest performance horse event in the world now. The planning and all of that to see this stuff come off, you're in the entertainment business. You're dealing with lots of people and you're making lots of people happy, maybe a few of them mad, but most of them happy. And so looking back through those 30 years, I think the most rewarding part of this is that we were able to be in the association business and in the entertainment aspect of the business at the same time. And I would have never dreamed when I came to Albuquerque for the very first time over here that this is the way it would have gone, but it took its own life, and when its own took me where it was going. And my family is all of them. My wife Connie runs the Equine Network events division. She's running 7 companies over there. Both my daughters are in it. My son is my partner in the Riata Stallion Incentive. So we've got our whole clan involved, and they all grew up in it.
I think that's a really special part. We often talk about it in ranching and in the industry. For something to be generational is a really special thing that doesn't happen in all industries, but it does in the Western industry.
It does.
Yeah, that's really neat. So you've talked about your family now. Hold on, let me think. What inspires you to keep going and to keep coming up with the next great idea?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Dion's took the best parts of a green chili bacon cheeseburger and made them a pizza. Savory beef, hatch green chili, crispy bacon, and melty cheese, all on a handcrafted crust. It's bold, it's beefy, it's a pizza worth sharing. Try it today at any Dion's location.
I guess I would. I've been asked that a lot, and I wish there was an easy answer, but to me, it's kind of these things take their course, and one thing leads to the other. You solve a problem, you create a new, and it just transpires over time and everything, and the creativity part, there's been a few things that I've invented through the years that there's patents on, and very unique things that the other organizations have borrowed and everything, and those were unique. And the only way I can tell people that we came up with those is, I said, well, I don't know. It was kind of like I hear these guys talk about these songs they write, and they don't know where the songs came from. Well, a lot of times I'd go to bed thinking about this problem, and I'd wake up the next morning, and here's the solution. It's the divine intervention or whatever you want to call it. But in a lot of them, that have come up were by accident. I did a interview for a magazine one time, and they asked me the question, what's better, the electronic barrier or a rope barrier? And that's always been a good argument for rodeo cowboys to argue about that, because team roping, everybody was going to electronics, and in the early years there were a lot of problems with it. And my comment was real simple. I said, neither. They're both crappy. And, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, they're predicated off the same theory that the animal starts and you give him a head start, and then the horse goes, and then you've got to learn to judge all this and all this rigmarole. And we are in the, now that we deal with all different classes of cowboys, we need a better system than that. And so the very next day, I had maybe 5 phone calls of guys that had thought up new systems and everything, and they weren't, none of them were very viable. And that's when we came up with the World Series system. And we started out with Preferred Manufacturing, and Farm Tech was doing our electronics for us. And the first one we did was not very good, but it led to the second one. And now you can't find a team roping in this country that's not using that World Series barrier. And so that one thing there led to that whole deal. And the first one that I did, Preferred Manufacturing, gave me the patent on it. So it's absolutely worthless because we threw it in the trash after the first year. But I got that patent anyway.
Oh, that's neat. Might need a frame.
Yeah.
Well, that's neat. Well, I think finding solutions to problems is always
that's the answer.
Great way to live.
Yeah.
What about you've mentioned lots of connections in New Mexico, and I probably couldn't name a cowboy or even a rancher in the U.S. that you didn't know, or you didn't know somebody that knew. What's that like, making those connections and those building those relationships with
it's great.
Yeah.
We had a good start, though, because in the early years of classifications, we didn't have any of this computer technology we've got now. So we had to first identify who all the ropers were, and then try to get them classified on the system that we had. And to do that, I built in 1990, I got on the road and lived. I lived on the road for 2 years, and we had 1,800 committee members in the United States, and we were doing 2 votes a year on 100,000 ropers. So that was 2 million key punches twice a year. And then I would go to those states, and I'd get the committee members there, and then I would show them how I saw the different handicaps as we went through. So all of those networks were built right then on year one, because they were the leaders of the industry in their area, and a lot of them were well-known ranchers and rodeo cowboys and everything. And that was my 6 degrees of separation from every cowboy in the United States. And in fact, when we got the database up, even before the handicap deal started, we'd have somebody whose daughter had broke down in the middle of between blank, blank, Oregon and blank, blank, Austria. And we're out here at mile marker so-and-so, and we'd go in and pull the zip code up and say, these are the 2 phone numbers, call these people and they'll come help you. And it might be a ranch that was 5 miles away. So before the AAA got going, we were providing AAA to our people when they were going all over, because we had that network built, and it was all coming off of that database.
Yeah, and that association mindset that when you're part of our group, we're going to take care of you.
Yeah.
That's really neat. That's great. So maybe if you have anything else to add, and then I like to ask the last question, is your favorite way to eat beef. But anything else you'd like to add about ranching or the horse and cattle businesses?
No, the only you're in here marketing beef, and the one thing that I want to tell you is that I'm the greatest marketer of beef in the history of New Mexico, and because every association executive that ever came along was supposed to promote beef, whatever that meant. And if you were from New Mexico or Idaho or some other state that didn't have a packing plant, it was pretty hard to say we're going to promote New Mexico beef when we knew they were all going to the Panhandle of Texas over there. So I had this friend at the legislature who was a lobbyist for Public Service Company in New Mexico. And back in the 80s, Public Service Company in New Mexico was diversifying. They had a lot of other businesses going. And one Friday afternoon after the session, we stopped by the Bull Ring for a refreshment. And he said, "What are you going to do this weekend?" And I told him, "What are you doing?" He said, "Well, I've got to go up here to Four Corners area. Mitsubishi Trading Company, which was the largest trading company in the world at that time, is coming in, and we're going to meet with them, and they want to buy some coal from us. We've got huge coal deposits on our land up here." Well, I knew that they were the top trader in beef. And so I just made a smart remark. And I said, well, while you're at it, get us a beef contract while you're up there. Get New Mexico some beef contract. So about 2 months later, Don Hoffman, who ran the Bell Ranch, called me up on the phone. And he said, he said, Mac Baldridge, who's the Secretary of Commerce, is coming into town. And he said, he's a neighbor. He's got a ranch next to me down at Claunch. And he said, Mac wants to meet you. And I thought, me? Well, he said, he wants to meet you. Come to lunch and go. So I went in, and Mac stood up and shook my hand, introduced himself, and he said, you're kind of famous in our office right now. And I said, I am. What did I do? And he said, well, Mitsubishi carved off 200,000 metric tons of beef for the state of New Mexico, and I'm here to meet with Carter Packing Company to see, because that's the only packing company we can find that can handle this bid. So I'd always beat my chest all the time, and I'd say, I'm worth a fortune because I'm the only one that's ever sold any beef in New Mexico beef.
Oh man, that's quite the legacy to follow. What a deal! What a deal, and what a fun story. Well, thank you for selling New Mexico beef long before they hired me, because that's what a great thing. Again, I just we love to leave this question for last. But what's your favorite way to eat beef?
Often.
That's probably the best answer.
Time changes a lot. And, when this beef council first came in, and right near here, Paul Freed used to have his office right here, and Paul and I are good buddies. And we talked about this a lot, how times were going to change. And he was always defending against the PETA and the anti-beef groups and all of that. At that time, they were beating the drum, and you're not supposed to eat more than 6 ounces of beef. You don't eat it more than every 3 days. And they had all of these things going on. Now, 30 years later, here you guys are, and you've got these diets that have been scientifically put together, and the carnivore diet and all of that. I mean, you're on the other side of that now. I mean, you're not over here defending yourself. They're trying to figure out a new strategy to stop the science, because basically the nutritionists that you've got right now, their guns are loaded. Our nutritionists were just defending themselves with shields was all they were doing at the beginning. Okay. So that's the thick of it. There's been a huge change.
Huge. We have a dietitian that works for us, and we talk about the plethora of resources and things that are to our advantage or to our benefit that, people are saying. And we've been taught for a while now to stay on the edge of the grocery store. That's good for beef. That's everything tells us that beef is healthy, and beef can and should be a part of a healthy diet. And so we do get to ride the wave of the battles won.
Well, and talking front of the cow to the back of the cow, when Paul and I were here visiting about it, he said, I spend a lot of time talking about cow farts. And he said, and I was thinking about the other day, I was listening to someone talk about it, and we've moved from that end to the other end, and they figured out now that cows don't fart. So we're talking about cow burps now.
Right. At least we've gotten the
We've
correct.
gone from one end to the other end now.
Well, at least we have the anatomy correct now. And the good news is we have a lot of research and a lot of studies now. I know the Colorado State University Ag Next program has studied more cattle in the 4 years that they've been in existence than were ever studied before on these cow farts and cow burps. Yeah. And now we've got a lot of new information that's telling the truth that cattle aren't bad.
I mean, that's still a defensive posture. You have to defend the ridiculous, but that's just part of the.
Yep.
That's part of the game,
Absolutely. Well, we're really excited, are really grateful that you were willing to tell your side of the story, and even talk about a unique thing that a lot of especially me, that I'm kind of agriculture adjacent. What we do on the weekends is team roping, and so thank you for talking beef and talking roping with us. And again, thank you for everything.
Thank you for asking me over.
Behind the Burger is a podcast produced by the New Mexico Beef Council with the goal of telling the stories of the cattlemen and cattlewomen of the New Mexico beef industry. Thank you for joining us for today's episode. If you would like more information, please visit nmbeef.com. Whether it be a burger, a steak, or another beef dish, we hope you are enjoying beef at your next meal.